Chapter 476, Great Calamity, 2. Countless evil spirits and monsters filling the horizon beyond. Although she had guessed that he was trying to cause another great calamity like before, Chong Ryong was left speechless at the sight of so many evil spirits and monsters. Even if a large army of humans were to push down like that, it would be enough to fall into despair, but this was enough to take the breath away even from her, a spirit. Looking at her like this, Zhang Haiyanmun, the Righteous Alliance leader with his back to the evil spirits and monsters, spoke with a face full of madness while tapping his forehead. In a game of chess, one must not look just one move ahead. Look at those below. The entrance to the 10,000 Great Mountains. That place was literally a battlefield of hell. They were killing each other over the ideological conflict between righteousness and evil. Looking at them, Zhang Haiyanmun sneered. The more experience the better. I learned through many errors. There's no need to suppress the human race with greater force. Mere beasts harm other beings to survive day by day. But humans are different. They harm each other just because their thoughts differ. Yes, Ryu Soul. You can't refute it either. That's human nature. They try to destroy each other over trivial ideological conflicts. Shut up. Isn't this your scheme? Scheme? Haha. Isn't it more ridiculous that this happens with just one scheme? It's human nature to try to harm each other. They're so eager to devour each other that they don't even notice the flames rising to their chins when just a small spark is thrown. Chong Ryong alternately looked at the evil spirits and monsters rushing in from beyond the horizon and the three major factions waging war. If they continue fighting like this, it will truly lead to mutual destruction. Although it was still the early stages and both sides maintained over 70% of their forces, by the time those arrive, their numbers will have significantly decreased and they'll already be exhausted. If that happens, they'll be swept up in the great calamity without a chance to react. I must stop this. She couldn't let things go as he wished. Only by stopping the war now and joining forces could they respond to those evil spirits and monsters. I need to spread the demonic intent domain to divert their attention. As someone whose vengeful spirit had already surpassed the purple spirit level, she could spread the demonic intent domain over a vast area. Although the sun was still up, it would be possible for a very brief moment. The one in front of her wasn't important right now. After all, he wasn't even the real body. Chong Ryong moved her fingers slightly. Then, whoosh. Blood poured down from the air like a waterfall, engulfing Zhang Haiyanmun, the Righteous Alliance leader. Knowing that this alone wasn't enough, she made a gesture of clenching her hand towards the pouring blood waterfall. Grip. Along with this, the blood gathered and condensed. As the blood compressed more and more into a spherical shape, she extended her index finger towards it. Then, boom. At that moment, the surrounding space seemed to compress, converging into a single point, and the blood sphere was sucked into the center. It was the void suppression, one of the 8 thought-shattering techniques. This should be enough to bind him for a moment. Flinch. At that instant, Chong Ryong hurriedly twisted her body. As she turned, the famous sword Iwai, imbued with blue sword energy, barely grazed her. At this, she spun her body and unleashed the full moon technique with the famous sword Sunyun. The sword energy spreading out in a wide circle was split by someone's sword energy unleashed through fingertips. Swish. The one who split it was Zhang Haiyanmun, the Righteous Alliance leader. Zhang Haiyanmun spoke to Chong Ryong with eyes that had turned coldly. I didn't expect this. To think you'd choose to save those vermin over revenge. I said I wouldn't let things go as you wish. Even if it's the obsession of revenge, your mind should be full of me alone, not enough room for anything else. Ha. At Zhang Haiyanmun's words, Chong Ryong's gaze turned icy cold. She hadn't understood until now. She had only thought that his madness exploded because he couldn't have her. But these words now were utterly shocking. She couldn't understand why he who claimed to want her was trying to take away everything from her, and it gave her goosebumps. Even if it was desire, did he want her to think only of him? You're truly the worst. Can obsession, when it turns to madness, become this ugly? Despite her disappointment, Zhang Haiyanmun didn't care. He rather smiled at Chong Ryong. Yes. Your mind should be filled only with me. Get lost. Poof. With those words, Chong Ryong flew backwards, avoiding the sword energy flying towards her. Swish. She dodged. A strange light flickered in Zhang Haiyanmun's eyes. He had thought she wouldn't be able to dodge this due to her mind being scattered by anger. However, contrary to his judgment, her concentration was now at its peak. After dodging the sword energy, Chong Ryong waved her hand, creating hundreds of arrows made of blood and shot them towards Zhang Haiyanmun. Bang! Along with this, she flew towards the 10,000 Great Mountains. There was no more time to waste with him. However, boom! At that moment, numerous pillars appeared around her. It resembled the pillars of the Four Peaks linking technique that Mok Jiangun used, but the number was different. There were 36 pillars. As these pillars surrounded her, layers of surfaces made of spell power were instantly created, and she was trapped inside. At this, Chong Ryong swung Sun Yun wrapped in spiritual energy to break through, but, clang! Far from breaking, the wall of spell power didn't even get a scratch. It was a sealing technique even more intricate than the Four Peaks linking technique. Chong Ryong turned her head to glare at Zhang Haiyanmun. Zhang Haiyanmun, forming a hand seal with his left hand, raised the corner of his mouth and shrugged. Even without martial arts, with just magic arts and techniques, I have reached the pinnacle of this world. There is no way for you to escape from here, So-wol. Bang! Bang! Ignoring his words, Chong Ryong tried to destroy the sealing technique made of spell power. She didn't want to listen to anything he said anymore. Zhang Haiyanmun sneered at her behavior. Wait here. I'll soon bring the vessel containing your soul. Swish. As soon as those words ended, Zhang Haiyanmun's body blurred and disappeared. Seeing this, Chong Ryong gritted her teeth and swung her sword infused with blood-colored spiritual energy towards the wall of the sealing technique. Clang 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 clang. As she swung her sword like this, she soon changed her mind. This wasn't something that could be broken in this way. In her mind, she recalled the single sword strike that Mok Jiangun used to concentrate all his power into one point. She had watched this countless times from closer than anyone else. Power. If a mortal could do it, there's no reason I can't. She then began to concentrate all her spiritual energy on the tip of the famous sword Sun Yun. Li Jiom, the Corpse Blood Valley Master, looked around with bewildered eyes. He wanted to announce that this was a scheme of the secret society and that the war should be stopped, as ordered by his lord Chong Ryong, but it was already too late for that. The warriors of the former Heaven and Earth Society, the Righteous Alliance and the Evil Alliance were all mixed up, killing each other, and in this situation could they really stop? Moreover, the highest-ranking officials were fighting against the leaders of the enemies, so there was nothing that could be done. Even if they stopped on this side, it was questionable whether the Righteous Alliance or the Evil Alliance would stop. What on earth should I do? As Jiom was pondering, someone suddenly caught his eye. Stop. I am from the Righteous faction. I am not an enemy. It was none other than Mok Yucheon. He had been taken as a hostage of the Righteous faction along with Mok Jiangun, but had become a disciple of Bright Blade King Sun Yun. Having become a disciple of Sun Yun and with his brother Mok Jiangun becoming the leader of this huge organization, Jiom thought he would no longer cling to the Righteous faction. But what was he doing now? Damn it! Mok Yucheon was pleading to the Righteous faction warriors that he was one of them. However, there was no way this would reach the ears of these low-ranking warriors in the midst of war. They ignored this and attacked Mok Yucheon. Nonsense. Die. Clang 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 clang. Kook. Mok Yucheon was frustrated but tried his best not to kill them, yet he was being driven into a corner as even the high-level experts of the Righteous Alliance began to appear. At this, poof. Stop. Whoosh. Li Jiom swung a fiery energy to help Mok Yucheon, who was driven into a corner. Although dozens of peak and first-class experts were jointly attacking Mok Yucheon, the situation changed when Li Jiom, a master of the transformation realm, intervened. Damn it! Retreat! Retreat! Those who judged they couldn't handle Li Jiom hurriedly turned away. Why? Although he had struggled to survive somehow, Mok Yucheon had never abandoned his roots as a Righteous Path practitioner until the end. But the Righteous Alliance warriors, whom he considered allies, didn't believe him despite his cries that were almost screams, and it was actually an executive of the Heaven and Earth Society who saved him. Bang! 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 Mok Yucheon repeatedly struck the ground with complicated feelings. Now he didn't know what was right and wrong anymore. Everything was incomprehensible, from joining hands with the Evil Alliance, their mortal enemy, to attack just one Heaven and Earth Society. Isn't this no different from the Evil faction? In the end, how is this different from moving based on practical benefits rather than judging right and wrong? Ma Qiuqian was utterly disappointed in everything. Why like this? Why are you so despondent? Disciple of Bright Blade King. Do you still think you're the same as them? Shut up. Ma Qiuqian couldn't finish his words. The concept of righteousness and evil had long been shattered in his once firm mind. To him, Li Jiom, the Corpse Blood Valley Master, said, "You can judge for yourself what is right and wrong. There is no right or wrong in righteousness and evil to begin with. It's just that everyone aims for different things. But before that, you need to help me a bit." What? This war is a scheme created behind the scenes by those called the Secret Society. The Righteous Alliance and the Evil Alliance are now moving after falling for their machinations. If it's the Secret Society, could it be that? Yes. It's because they moved that the Righteous Alliance and the Evil Alliance joined hands to attack us. There's no time to explain further. You should immediately find your master, Bright Blade King, and deliver this. Before he could finish speaking, Ma Qiuqian shook his head and put his hand in his bosom, saying, "No. If that's true, I should find the head of the Wangbo clan, not Bright Blade King." The head of the Wangbo clan? Do you mean Wangbo Song? Yes. The head of the Wangbo clan is the leader of the Silent Strides. Silent Strides? So he was the one in charge of moving the spies. But what does that matter now? None of the Righteous Alliance members will believe you now. No. The head of the Wangbo clan will believe me. Swish. With those words, Ma Qiuqian pulled out a token from his bosom. It was the token that Ma Sang, an agent of the Silent Strides, the Righteous Alliance's spy group, had passed to Ma Qiuqian before being captured for spy detection in the Corpse Blood Valley. Although ordinary Righteous Alliance warriors might not recognize this token, it was different for Wangbo Song, the head of the Wangbo clan and the leader of Silent Strides. Block him. We must block him. The Corpse Blood Valley warriors desperately launched joint attacks to try to stop Zhang Haiyanmun, the Righteous Alliance leader. However, the title of being at the pinnacle of the current martial world wasn't for nothing. Foolish ones. Ha ha ha. Swish. Every time he gestured with his sword energy-imbued fingers. Swish. Swish 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 swish. Coup. Arg. Sharp sword energy tore them apart and they only lost their lives. All sword formations and defense lines were broken and only 8 remained. Looking at those who were desperately trying to block him while backing against the rock with the secret passage, Zhang Haiyanmun sneered. That's right. Squirm to your best like the insects you are. Zhang Haiyanmun was about to move his hand to kill the remaining ones. But as he was about to do so, suddenly as if something was blocking the sunlight, he saw a shadow being cast. What is this? What's going on? At that moment, the Corpse Blood Valley warriors guarding the rock looked up, unable to hide their bewilderment. Flinch. What is this? These complex energies? This was clearly ghost energy. Zhang Haiyanmun raised one eyebrow. It was impossible for Ryu Sowul to have escaped from the 36 stopping and sealing techniques that he had specially made just for her, and there was too much ghost energy for that. Whoosh. As the puzzled Zhang Haiyanmun lifted his head, he saw a large ship covered with numerous vengeful spirits falling at an incredible speed over the peak above his head. Chapter 477, Great Calamity, 3. Just moments ago, high in the sky, the demonic beast Human was flapping its wings vigorously. However, unlike usual, its wing motion seemed quite awkward and strained. This was because something was clinging to and replacing Human's wings, and that something was none other than hundreds of vengeful spirits. Originally, it should have gone through a recovery period for the wounded areas along with its demon power, but thanks to the vengeful spirits clinging and each one acting as a feather, it had barely managed to fly this far. However, flap flap. Now it seemed to be at its limit. Both the clinging vengeful spirits and the demonic beast Human were struggling to keep flapping. The one fortunate thing was, there it is. Damn it. Is the war already underway? Siep Chun, looking down at the 10,000 great mountains below the ship, clicked his tongue. He knew something was happening, but he didn't expect the war to be in full swing already. To him, Jiajiam Zhang, the fallen monk subduing demon, said, Hey Siep Chun. That's all well and good, but we should probably decide where to land soon. Groan. The demonic beast Human's wing flaps were very unstable. It was evident from how the ship was gradually tilting. Mong Muyak, who had somewhat recovered from his internal injuries during the journey and regained his complexion, looked down. It's difficult anywhere. But since the war was already well underway, the various factions were all mixed up, making it hard to determine where to land. Just then the vengeful spirit Ha Yun at the bow of the ship pointed somewhere. Whoosh! A heightened killing intent could be felt. At this, Gyeong Sao, the 8-poison snake master, approached while leaning on his snake-headed cane and asked, "What's wrong?" "It's him. That's definitely him." The place the vengeful spirit Ha Yun pointed to was a mountain peak in the rear of where the war was taking place. Being so high up, it wasn't possible to see who was who. However, Gyeong Sao could guess one thing from the killing intent he felt from him. Could he be there? "If you really fight the one with the third eye, you'll know for sure. I still remember that time." At these words from the vengeful spirit Ha Yun, Gyeong Sao recalled when he had received his help not long ago. At first he thought it was truly strange to receive help from a vengeful spirit. But soon he learned that the vengeful spirit Ha Yun had connections with Mok Jae-eun, Seop Chun, Mong Muyak and others. When Seop Chun explained their situation at that time, the vengeful spirit Ha Yun couldn't contain his anger. "You said there's a being with a third eye on its forehead?" After that he didn't give any detailed explanations, but it was clear that the vengeful spirit Ha Yun had some terrible grudge against Mok Gon, the leader of the secret society. Just then the vengeful spirit Ha Yun shouted to Mok Jae-eun's subordinates on the ship. "The ship will land soon. Hold on tight to the deck or anywhere you can. Land. Where on earth does he intend to do that?" As they were puzzled, the vengeful spirit Ha Yun shouted to the demonic beast Hyumwon, who was holding the ship with its huge claws. "Hyumwon, land the ship towards that peak over there. No, throw the ship there." "A ship? How is a ship?" "It's falling here. I'll run away." The Corpse Blood Valley warriors guarding the rock entrance to the secret passage were so shocked at the sight of a large ship falling towards the peak that they scattered in panic. However, Jong Hyunmun, the Righteous Alliance leader, had no intention of avoiding it. Humph. Rather, he sneered at the falling ship and then swung his famous sword Iowai upwards. Swoosh. The moment Jong Hyunmun swung his sword, a massive sword energy nearly 10 jang long surged from the famous sword Iowai, splitting the falling ship in half. The ship, split in two, continued to fall, and the impact shook the peak as if an earthquake had struck. Boom. It was chaos as shattered peak fragments flew in all directions. In the midst of this, Jong Hyunmun, who had protected himself with his reverse force technique, deflected the fragments and dust with his sword energy as he headed towards the rock entrance. "Did you think you could stop me with something like this?" It was quite novel, but in the end it was just a falling object. But as he walked forward, a fist attack flew towards him. Bang! Clang! Jong Hyunmun deflected the fist attack, which had power beyond his expectations, with his famous sword Iowai imbued with sword energy. After deflecting the fist attack, he looked ahead and saw 5 figures in front of him. Recognizing them, Jong Hyunmun shook his head. They were Mok Jae-eun's loyal subordinates. Led by Jajiam Jong, the fallen monk subduing demon who was taking the stance of the 100-step divine fist, there was Ma Arehyun with his face covered by a black cloth, Gyeong Sao, the 8-poison snake master, holding his cane and exuding poison energy, and Seop Chun and Mong Muyak, all taking battle stances and blocking his path. Jong Hyunmun sneered at them and said, "You vermin have long lifespans." "Kiki, who are you calling vermin? Ui parasite." Jajiam Jong shouted, not at all intimidated by his aura. Jong Hyunmun's eyes filled with displeasure at his outcry. Just because they were lucky enough to barely survive and return doesn't mean they can be his opponents. Yet these vermin dare to stand on the same level as him. "I'll have to make you feel how insignificant you are." Rumble. It was at that moment. Suddenly, dark clouds began to gather over the mountain peak where they were. Then the dark clouds flashed and thunder and lightning struck. Jong Hyunmun's eyes narrowed. A demonic intent domain? As dark clouds formed where there had been not a single cloud before, Jong Hyunmun immediately realized that this was not a natural phenomenon, but a demonic intent domain created by a high-level vengeful spirit. Slither. But that wasn't the end of it. Numerous vengeful spirits began to appear all around. An incredible number of vengeful spirits, too many to count, filled the entire peak, and as ghost energy spread in all directions, those nearby got goosebumps without knowing why. In the midst of these vengeful spirits, an extraordinary vengeful spirit holding dual swords in both hands appeared. A high level, on par with Chong Ryong. No, even beyond that. The aura felt now seemed to be at the level of indigo spirit, not just on par with Chong Ryong. And yet, that vengeful spirit's appearance was strangely familiar. However, Zhang Haiyanmun didn't care about this. Rather, these vermin are annoying me. Those blocking his path were merely a nuisance. But unlike before, there were two masters of the transformation realm, one with strange power comparable to them, two at the peak of the transcendent realm, and on top of that, a vengeful spirit close to the indigo spirit level. Even for a body at the pinnacle, this couldn't be easily overcome, so he could no longer afford to hold back his strength. Crack. Zhang Haiyanmun's forehead split open, revealing his third eye. As the eye opened, the tremendous energy that spread out caused Mok Jiangun's subordinates blocking his path to tense up with wariness. On the other hand, the three eyes. Whoosh. The vengeful spirit Ha Yun's resentment exploded even more upon confirming the third eye. His resentment was so deep that regardless of Zhang Haiyanmun's energy after opening the third eye, the vengeful spirit Ha Yun flew towards him without any hesitation. Today I will wash away the disloyalty of not being able to protect him that day. At the same time, Chong Ryong, trapped in the 36 stopping and sealing techniques, was concentrating all her power on the tip of the famous sword Sun Yun to break it. Power wasn't simply gathering spiritual energy into the sword. It literally meant imbuing it with the insights and form intent she had gained about the sword over time. In life, she had reached the transformation realm, transcending walls. Normally, it would be far from enough to concentrate power into a single point. However, for her who had become a vengeful spirit, human realms were meaningless. Rather, as a vengeful spirit, she had surpassed even the limit of purple spirit, considered the peak of their ranks. The tip of Sun Yun, the pure white sword, was dyed in deep blood color. Her confused mind became blank, focusing on only one thing. Mortal. It was the image of Mok Jiangun when he concentrated all his power into one. As she projected this image onto herself, it became one with her mind. Swish. At that moment, a red line was drawn in the air. Crack. With that, the layered walls made of the main force of the 36 stopping and sealing techniques, which had seemed unbreakable, split in an instant. I did it. As she momentarily reached the realm of sword extreme that she couldn't attain in life, Chong Ryong's eyes filled with joy. All those experiences shared with mortal had accumulated to become her enlightenment. But this elation was short-lived. Her spirit body staggered as it escaped from the 36 stopping and sealing techniques. To think spiritual energy would be consumed to this extent? She had expected it to some degree since she concentrated all her spiritual energy into one point, but she didn't know it would impact her spirit body this much. As she staggered, she soon drew up her remaining spiritual energy. There was no time to waste like this. She had to go down immediately and warn about the approaching great calamity. Even if she exhausted all her remaining spiritual energy and her spirit body was on the verge of disappearing, she had to stop this. Until mortal arrived, she was the only one who could do this. Swish. It was at that very moment. A sharp sword energy grazed past, cutting off Chong Ryong's arm that was holding the famous sword Sun Yun. A scream burst from her lips as her spirit body was cut. Hiss. Her severed arm, being a spirit body, scattered and dissipated. However, the famous sword Sun Yun, being a physical object, was about to fall. She hurriedly tried to endure the pain and pull the famous sword Sun Yun back with her spiritual energy. Yo! But since her right arm's spirit body, which had been concentrating spiritual energy, was cut off, she couldn't pull it back. She flew downwards to catch the falling Sun Yun. She was falling to catch the sword. Whoosh. Grab. At that moment, the falling famous sword Sun Yun was caught by someone's hand. It was a middle-aged man with a rough appearance, thick eyebrows and wearing a tiger skin. Though it was a face she was seeing for the first time, the chilling pressure she felt upon seeing him made Chong Ryong stop her flight and distance herself. After creating distance, she spoke with a darkened expression. What exactly is that body? As expected, you recognize it at a glance. Crack. With those words, the middle-aged man's forehead split open, revealing a third eye. As expected, it was Mok Gon's avatar. But while her spirit body had weakened, the pressure was on a different dimension from the avatars she had seen so far. The sharp energy flowing out felt like it could tear her apart at any moment. It's the body I cherish the most. I put quite a lot of effort into it. How many avatars have you created? Isn't it more foolish to think I only made a few avatars over countless years? Soul. Of course, creating an avatar is like splitting a healthy soul, so it's not infinite. Regrettably, these are the last avatars. Swish. Swish. As soon as his words ended, 2 more men appeared around her. Pointing at them with his eyes, Mok Gon's avatar said with a sneer. Leaving some in reserve is also a strategy. Chong Ryong's expression darkened at his words. While not as much as the avatar wearing the tiger skin in front of her, these were no ordinary beings either. No, from the moment Mok Gon possessed the body, they could be called peerless masters since they shared his enlightenment. Fighting is impossible. Poof. After quickly scanning them, Chong Ryong flew her form downwards. However, Mok Gon's avatar wearing the tiger skin blocked her path. Swish. Grab. Appearing with a shape-shifting technique, he roughly grabbed Chong Ryong's weakened left arm. Then raising the famous sword Sunyun, he said, "Even if your spirit body is damaged a bit more, it won't affect becoming one with your soul, so I'll leave just the head and torso. That anger will soon turn into affection." Mok Gon's avatar wearing the tiger skin swung down the famous sword Sunyun towards Chong Ryong's left arm with a mad smile. Swish. Even though she had become a vengeful spirit, at the moment her arm was about to be cut off, she unconsciously flinched and couldn't help but close her eyes. But, twitch. Why do I still have sensation when my arm should have been cut off? Puzzled, she opened her eyes and, cuff. In front of her eyes, Mok Gon's avatar wearing the tiger skin had not only created a considerable distance but was also clutching his severed right wrist in pain. What on earth is going on? As she wondered, Mok Gon's 2 avatars suddenly shouted in anger and flew towards her. Poof. You bastard! How dare you! It was at that very moment. Swoosh 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 swoosh. Between the 2 avatars rushing at incredible speed, black lines drew trajectories in all directions like meteors in the night sky. Then their approaching bodies were split into dozens, hundreds of pieces. Amidst the spraying blood in the air, the appearance of someone long awaited. At this, Chong Ryong murmured with reddened eyes. Mortal. It was none other than Mok Jaeongun. Chapter 478. Descent of the Heavenly Demon, 1. Swish. What on earth is going on? Mok Gon's avatar wearing the tiger skin couldn't hide his bewilderment. This body was arguably the finest among all the avatars. Hyuk Youngji, known as the first sword of the Wanderers, the pinnacle of the previous generation's martial world. He was known to have no rival with the sword in the north, but one day he suddenly disappeared, a peerless master. It was no exaggeration to say he was the best except for the main body, but to not only be unable to approach but to only realize after being cut with such an avatar's body. How? How already? What was even more incredible was his appearance. It was a distance that would take at least 15 days riding a horse without rest, so how could he appear here already? It was an incomprehensible speed. Kill him. The avatar Hyuk Youngji sent his thoughts to the other 2 avatars. Whatever happened, they had to kill him here. You bastard! How dare you! As soon as the avatar Hyuk Youngji's thoughts fell, the 2 Mok Gon avatars simultaneously flew their forms like lightning. However, swoosh 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 swoosh. Between the 2 avatars rushing at incredible speed, black lines drew trajectories in all directions like meteors in the night sky. Then their approaching bodies were split into dozens, hundreds of pieces. Ah! The 3 eyes of the avatar Hyuk Youngji trembled. To think he would instantly cut down 2 avatars whose realms could only be raised to the profound realm due to the limits of their physical body's qualities. This guy had become much stronger than at the ruined castle's death forest. Chong Ryong. Mok Jaeongun, who had instantly cut the 2 Mok Gon avatars into pieces of meat, embraced the staggering Chong Ryong. Mortal. Jungsong. Chong Ryong hugged Mok Jaeongun and cried. She had come this far trusting him, but her mind had been constantly filled with worry for him. But when she saw his face, the tears she had been holding back poured out. Being a vengeful spirit, blood tears flowed, and Mok Jaeongun wiped her tears with a gentle smile and showed her something. It was Sunyun, her unique weapon. Sunyun. This. Before he could finish speaking, The avatar Hyuk Youngji with his arm cut off was seen forming a hand seal towards Mok Jae-eun and chanting something. At that moment Mok Jae-eun's eyes flashed. Then, splash. Ku. Black blood gushed from Hyuk Youngji's mouth as he was forming the hand seal. Hyuk Youngji, who had spurted blood like a fountain, clutched his chest where his heart was with shocked eyes. A sharp sword piercing his chest. Though invisible, the sword had torn his heart to shreds. The pain was indescribable, and looking at him Mok Jae-eun spoke with cold eyes. The supreme void sealing reversal technique no longer works. You. The price for making her shed tears. It's death. You bastard. Disappear. Mok Jae-eun lightly moved his sword energy-imbued fingers towards the avatar. Then sharp sword energy enveloped Hyuk Youngji's body as he was forming the hand seal, and then, swoosh 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 swoosh. His body simply exploded. It was the price for being cut more finely than the other avatars. As the avatar who prided himself as the strongest turned to dust and died, Mok Jae-eun was about to say something to Chong Ryong as if he had been waiting. However, swish. Mok Jae-eun gently stroked her head as she lost consciousness due to extreme spiritual energy loss. She had come all this way without rest and endured with the utmost determination to stop Mok Gon, but it seemed her tension had eased with Mok Jae-eun's appearance. While holding her and stroking her head, Mok Jae-eun looked down at the 10,000 great mountains. Then, poof, he flew his form somewhere. It was the peak where Jong Hyunmun, the Righteous Alliance leader, and his subordinates were battling. Jong Hyunmun, who had opened his 3 eyes and exerted power comparable to the life and death realm beyond the profound realm, was truly invincible. Thud. Boom 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 boom. Cuff. Seop Chun, who had been knocked back by a single strike, spat blood and looked at Jong Hyunmun with blurry eyes. It was an unbelievable result despite the joint attack of 2 supreme masters of the transformation realm, one supreme master with matchless great ability comparable to them, vengeful spirits, and themselves. The vengeful spirit Ha Yun was on the verge of disappearing with his spirit limbs torn off, and Gyeong Sao, the master of poison techniques, had his abdomen pierced and was dying after just 10 moves, seemingly considered the most troublesome from the start. Even Ja Jiam Jong and Ma Ari Hyen, who were barely holding on, were not much different. Huff. Huff. Cough cough. Damn bastard. Covered in blood, they were barely standing while staggering, in a state where it wouldn't be strange if they collapsed at any moment. What was more shocking was that despite being prepared to die together with the enemy, they had only managed to inflict a few scratches. This was a monster that couldn't be dealt with in any way. Even if he was one of the 7 heavens at the pinnacle of the current martial world, wasn't this too much? Step. Annoying things. Did you vermin really think you could stop me? I'll tear all your limbs. Flinch. It was at that moment. Jong Hyunmun, who had been approaching them, suddenly stopped and looked up. As they were wondering why he was acting like that, Jong Hyunmun suddenly uttered incomprehensible words with a deeply furrowed expression. How are you already? Boom. Before he could finish speaking, something fell from the sky onto where Jong Hyunmun was, and with it the ground split, debris flew up, and the view was obscured by a cloud of dust. What's going on? As they were all bewildered by this sudden event. Hiss. Then the dust that had been obscuring the view dispersed on its own, revealing someone. The moment they saw that someone holding the blurry spirit body of Chong Ryong, Seop Chun shouted at the top of his lungs with reddened eyes. Pai Luord. It was none other than Mok Jae-eun. At the appearance of their long-awaited lord, all the subordinates, including Seop Chun, brightened up. Ah! But as the dust completely cleared, their joyful eyes widened. This was because there was a large hole where Mok Jae-eun was standing, and at his feet Jong Hyunmun's head and body were completely crushed. It was as if his body had been flattened by tremendous pressure. Ah! Ma Ari Hyen showed even dejection as if he was dumbfounded. He couldn't believe that an opponent who had barely been scratched even when they fought with their lives in a joint attack had ended up like this with just 1 strike. It felt embarrassing to even call him a monster anymore. He was truly a god of martial arts descended to the mortal world. Whoosh. Clang 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 clang. A faintly green staff and a sword imbued with flames clashed about 10 times in an instant. The green staff that didn't even get a scratch despite clashing with the flame-imbued sword was the dog-beating staff. the sacred object of the Beggars sect. Hong Won-suk, the leader of the Beggars sect, and Lee Ji-youm, the Corpse Blood Valley master, were exchanging techniques without giving an inch, leaving no openings to the extent that no one around could approach. Every time these two supreme masters clashed, exclamations of admiration flowed from all around. Is this a battle between Transformation Realm masters? It's incredible. I heard that Leader Hong is comparable to the 8 stars, the highest in the current martial world, but who on earth is that one-armed swordsman? To hold out like that against the Corpse Blood Valley master. That old beggar is no pushover either. The Righteous Alliance and former Heaven and Earth Society warriors surrounded them in a circle, watching as if observing a duel. The balance of the battle, which seemed like it would continue for a long time, began to shift slightly due to the Beggars sect leader's change in technique. Dog beating staff technique, 9th form. Press down the dog's head. As the dog beating staff moved dazzlingly, aiming for his neck, Lee Ji-youm tried to deflect it using the pear blossom grafting technique. But at that moment, Subduing Dragon 18 Palms, 2nd form. Dragon battle in the wild. The dog-beating staff technique was a feint. The moment he deflected the staff with his sword, Hong Won-suk's powerful left palm strike aimed for Lee Ji-youm's left shoulder. Normally he would have raised his left arm to block this, but having lost his left arm in the battle with the Secret Society executive, he couldn't do so. Bang. Kook. It was his unfamiliarity with having lost his left arm that allowed this opening. Lee Ji-youm's form was pushed back about 5 steps after being hit on the left shoulder by the palm technique. Thanks to taking a direct hit, his body momentarily froze due to the palm force. Not missing this moment, Hong Won-suk let go of the dog-beating staff, jumped high and tried to fly his form towards him. Subduing Dragon 18 Palms, 1st form. Flying dragon in the sky. With a momentum like a powerful dragon flying in, Lee Ji-youm tried to block it without fully dissipating the palm force in his shoulder. It was at that moment that someone intervened. It was Wangbo Song, the head of the Wangbo clan. Oh no! Flustered by the sudden intervention as he was about to finish the fight, Hong Won-suk, the Beggars sect leader, hurriedly directed both palms towards the ground to dissipate the palm force. Boom! The ground caved in due to his palm force, creating a large hole. Hong Won-suk, who rose from the hole, shouted with an angry voice. What is the meaning of this? Are you trying to protect the enemy now? Didn't I ask you to pause the battle for a moment? Pause the battle? Don't tell me you're going to believe what that guy is saying. The person Hong Won-suk pointed at was none other than Ma Qiuqian. He was kneeling with both knees on the ground and his hands behind his back, as if showing no intention to fight. He is a person from the Yun Mok Sword sect. Huh. How can you be so naive? Have you forgotten that he appeared together with a master from the Heaven and Earth Society? This is clearly a trap. To call it a trap, didn't you also find it strange, leader? Even with information and justification, this war was carried out too one-sidedly. War is bound to be one-sided in some way. How can the leader of the Silent Stride so easily believe the words of a traitor? Then how do you explain the token and the secret message tube? At Wangbo Song's outcry, Hong Won-suk, the Beggars sect leader, snorted and said, even if he had the Silent Stride's token, how do you know they didn't take it from him when they caught the spy? Why are you acting like this? At these words, Wangbo Song clicked his tongue. It seemed no matter what he said it wouldn't get through. The war was already well underway and the situation was favorable, so he probably wouldn't listen to a word he said, worried about morale dropping. Just then Ma Qiuqian shouted, I have not betrayed the righteous faction. I just struggled to survive. It was also I who sent the information about the internal rebellion in the Heaven and Earth Society, and later informed about a third organization intervening in that rebellion. How can you be so swayed by them? What? Who's being swayed by what? This is clearly a setup created by a third organization. Don't you find it too strange? No matter how strong the Heaven and Earth Society is, why suddenly form an alliance with the Evil Alliance and attack? Do you really not know? They want the Righteous Alliance, the Evil Alliance and the Heaven and Earth Society to fight each other to mutual destruction. Murmur, murmur. At Ma Qiuqian's outcry there was a stir here and there. This was because, although they had followed the decisions of their sect leaders, they too had found it strange how hastily the war was progressing, and despite overwhelming the enemy numerically and in strength, they suddenly formed an alliance with the Evil Alliance. Poof. You bastard. You're trying to lower our troops' morale with this ridiculous scheme. Just then Gu Qiuljia, the sect leader of the Huashan sect who was nearby, appeared and seemed to decide he couldn't let this continue after hearing Mok Yuchion's outcry. Flinch. But as Gu Qiuljia was about to fly his form towards him, he stopped and looked at his sword with a bewildered expression. What's this? Boom. The Huashan sect's famous sword, the purple sky sword, that he was holding was trembling and resonating. It wasn't just his sword. Tremble, tremble. What's going on? Why are the swords suddenly? The swords held by the swordsmen around were trembling as if they were alive. Then something unbelievable happened before their eyes. The swords held by swordsmen who died during the war or swords that had lost their masters suddenly began to float in the air. Chapter 479, Descent of the Heavenly Demon, 2. Jiajiamzhong. At Mok Jiangun's call, Jiajiamzhong, the fallen monk subduing demon, approached bewildered. He didn't understand why he was suddenly being called. As he was puzzled, Mok Jiangun handed over Chong Ryong, whom he had been holding, and said, "Take care of her." Cough cough. Asking this damn monk who used to beat up wandering spirits to take care of a vengeful spirit. I trust you. So protect her. At Mok Jiangun's short but weighty order, Jiajiamzhong hesitated for a moment, then respectfully extended both arms and answered. I receive your command. Usually, even when hearing Mok Jiangun's orders, he would have answered without hesitation. Always saying master, master, but never showing proper respect. Seeing him show proper respect for the first time, Sip Chun's eyes widened. Is the sun rising from the west? Did he just say he receives the command? At Sip Chun's sneer, the fallen monk Jiajiamzhong smacked his lips and said, Can't you feel it? What do you mean? Never mind. No, if you asked something, shouldn't you give a proper answer? Leaving the frustrated Sip Chun behind, Jiajiamzhong looked at Mok Jiangun. The last time he saw him was in the bamboo forest of the ruined old castle. Even then, unlike when they first met, he was gradually developing the qualities of a leader, moving from an unrestrained and emotionless feeling. But now Mok Jiangun was different. An indescribable dignity as an absolute being enveloped him. Because of this, although deep in his heart he had not been able to acknowledge him, thinking his fate was tied to something dirty, now he had no choice but to recognize him as his true lord. Is this what it means to be a true vessel to lead all people? It even evoked a strange emotion to have witnessed this change up close. Meanwhile, Mok Jiangun approached Guiyang Sao, the 8-poison snake master who had collapsed with his abdomen pierced. He placed his hand on Guiyang Sao's abdomen and formed a hand seal. Thud, thud, thud. Then Guiyang Sao's body trembled, the color returned to his pale face, and soon his breathing became regular. Ah! Mok Jiangun's subordinates, who had thought there was no hope due to the severity of the injury, couldn't hide their surprise. Regardless, Mok Jiangun next approached the vengeful spirit Haiyun, who was close to disappearing with his limbs cut off, and said, I owe you a debt. At those words, the vengeful spirit Haiyun smiled painfully and replied, Your Excellency's judgment was correct. This body was inadequate, and even as a vengeful spirit, I couldn't repay the resentment of failing to protect my lord. Could you perhaps ease that resentment? If that's enough. It will be enough. I heard you two must settle accounts with that person. I see. So he too was entangled with Mok Gon by a bad relationship. It was truly an extraordinary coincidence. Mok Jiangun then lightly patted the vengeful spirit Haiyun's shoulder and turned around. Then he said to his subordinates, You've worked hard. Leave the rest to me and guard this place until I finish things up. An order close to a request. Hearing this, a strange light flickered in the eyes of Sip Chun, Jiajiamzhong and Ma Arihayan. They felt something stirring deep in their hearts. At this, the three people simultaneously knelt on one knee and raised their clasped hands towards Mok Jiangun in a respectful gesture. Loyalty. Mok Jiangun looked at them with a faint smile, then erased it and slowly began to float. The three people watched this scene with puzzlement. The three major factions, the former Heaven and Earth Society, the Righteous Alliance and the Evil Alliance, were already intertwined and killing each other, so what could he do in this situation? Even though Mok Jiangun had become stronger, it was a difficult situation to do something alone. Of course, just his appearance would boost the morale of their allies, But that alone was not enough to stop this war. It was then. Rattle, rattle, rattle. The sound of something shaking strongly was heard. Maare Hyan's eyes saw swords that had lost their owners trembling. It wasn't happening to just one sword. All the sword handles on the ground, even the weapons, trembled as if resonating with something, and then float. The swords began to float in the air. As dozens of swords on the peak floated up simultaneously, not just one, Siap Chun's mouth fell open. Are you going to use sword energy with all these swords? At his exclamation, Jia Jiamzhong, holding Chong Ryong, snorted and said, Are your eyes not holes? What does that look like to you? This is. Siap Chun was at a loss for words at the scene unfolding before his eyes. It wasn't happening just on the peak where they were. Weapons like swords and sabers that had lost their owners or belonged to warriors were slowly rising from the peaks and mountainsides all over the 10,000 great mountains where the war was taking place. It was truly a spectacular sight. The swords. No, the weapons are floating. What on earth is going on? Bewildered voices erupted from here and there on the peak. The warriors of the three major factions who had been fiercely confronting and fighting each other could only stare blankly at the rising weapons. It was no different for the leaders and executives leading the three major factions. They too had their attention momentarily captured by the weapons rising in all directions. Float. Not understanding what was happening, it was nothing short of a strange phenomenon. Hong Won-suk, the beggar's sect leader, clicked his tongue and spoke. Weapons floating on their own. What on earth is this strange occurrence? Primordial Heavenly Lord. Even this poor Taoist has never seen such a sight before. Jin Sokja, the sect leader of the Qingqing sect, said this while looking at his own violently shaking sword. It felt as if the sword wanted to break free from his hand. Tremble, tremble. Sect leader Jin. The swords are responding to something. This is like. Gu Qiolja, the sect leader of the Huashan sect, swallowed dry saliva as he looked at the trembling purple sky sword. Instinctively he felt it. The swords were being drawn to the matchless power leading all swords. It was enough to shake even the hearts of the swordsmen. Meanwhile, there were two peerless masters engaged in an incredible battle, crossing back and forth over the peaks. Gah! They said your real combat experience had declined, but that's not entirely true. Clang, 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 clang. They were Hang Sim, the unruly evil hegemon and one of the evil alliance leaders, and Oh Cheonmu, the extreme sword master and leader of the spiritual sword sanctuary, both among the seven heavens at the pinnacle of the current martial world. Thanks to Mok Jiongun, Oh Cheonmu, who had honed his sword way and sword extreme through more real combat experience, was engaging in close combat with Hang Sim without giving an inch. Clang, 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 clang. Boom, 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 boom. Every time these two grand master-level peerless experts clashed swords, the surroundings were shattered by the aftershocks, and some even died from the wind pressure of their sword energy. A single mistake could cost one's life in a battle between grand masters. That's why all the nerves of the two masters were focused solely on their opponent. Strong. Truly strong. Kahahat. Yes. This is the kind of battle I've been longing for. The higher one's martial arts reach, the harder it is to find a worthy opponent. Although they met as enemies, they couldn't help but become increasingly immersed in this battle, having found an opponent to match their skills. However, their battle, which seemed unstoppable, came to a sudden halt. Flinch. The two peerless masters who had been clashing their sword and saber with full force, stopped their techniques without exception, creating distance and turning their gaze somewhere. They were looking at the same place. It was towards the top of a peak in the 10,000 Great Mountains, where someone could be seen floating, perhaps using the void walking technique. Oh Cheonmu recognized that someone at once. Pai Lord. It was none other than Mok Jiongun. The Shadow Clan master Huan Yixian had said there was no reply even when he sent a messenger, but had he returned just in time, albeit a bit late? But more than that, what on earth is this? Oh Cheonmu felt goosebumps all over his body. Sword. It felt as if Mok Jiongun's very existence had become a sword, and an unimaginable matchless power was encompassing everything, resonating with the swords and drawing them in. Tremble, tremble. If even his own sword, which had completely assimilated with his sword heart after reaching the sword way and sword extreme, was trembling in his hand, does this mean he had transcended realms once again? He wasn't the only one surprised. Hang Sim, the unruly evil hegemon, felt a shudder at the matchless power that could cover all directions. Drip, drip. Even his forehead, which hadn't sweated a drop while dueling with Ochionmu, was now dripping with cold sweat. What on earth is that? Did such a monster exist in this world? The numerous swords rising due to the matchless power were truly a spectacular sight, and it was awe-inspiring that he could resonate with and move all these swords. Grip. Hang Sim, the unruly evil hegemon, tightly gripped his trembling right hand with his left. Then he dug his nails in to calm his excitement. It's hard to find a worthy opponent. But it's even harder to encounter an absolute being beyond that. Kuhahahat. As if trying to drive away the awe that had entered deep into his heart, Hang Sim burst into a thunderous laugh. Then he kicked off the air, using the void stepping technique to fly towards Mok Jiongun, who was floating in the air. Hang Sim. Ochionmu shouted, but he was no longer the object of Hang Sim's interest. With such a delicious prey before his eyes, one he might never see again in his lifetime, how could he hesitate? Hang Sim tried to unleash his ultimate technique, gathering all his power towards Mok Jiongun. However, swish. Mok Jiongun, who had indifferently glanced at the approaching Hang Sim once, lightly waved his hand and swoosh 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 swoosh. Hang Sim's pupils trembled as he was using the void stepping technique. This was because about 100 of the numerous swords that had been floating in the air all flew towards him at once. He's handling this many swords simultaneously? Is this even possible in reality? His shock was short-lived. Hap. Hang Sim unleashed a tyrannical saber technique to counter this. His saber, emitting saber energy equivalent to 5 Jang, fiercely displayed saber techniques to respond to the incoming swords. But, clang 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 clang. Damn it. The energy carried by the swords exceeded his expectations. Despite gritting his teeth and unleashing his saber techniques, he couldn't withstand the momentum of the sword energy swords that endlessly circulated and crashed like waves and was swept away. Swoosh 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 swoosh. Cuff. The warriors of the 3 major factions watching this scene were so shocked they lost their words. This can't be. Is the unruly evil hegemon Hang Sim? Hang Sim, the strongest of the evil alliance and one of the 7 heavens, was swept away by the wave of swords in an instant without even being able to approach. What on earth is the identity of that monster? The attention of everyone who had been fighting so fiercely naturally turned to the being at the center of the thousands of swords covering the sky. Whoosh. Mok Jiongun, who had been scanning them with indifferent eyes, then opened his mouth. I am the heavenly demon. The brilliant flame that leads all demons and guides everything into darkness. Chapter 480. Descent of the Heavenly Demon 3. Thousands of swords and weapons covering the sky of the 10,000 great mountains. The warriors of the 3 major factions who until just moments ago had been focused solely on killing their opponents, couldn't take their eyes off the sky, awed by this tremendous display. Even a single sword moving on its own would be considered a marvel of sword energy control technique. But this scene was beyond imagination. Then a voice echoed in their ears like a reverberation. I am the heavenly demon. The brilliant flame that leads all demons and guides everything into darkness. Heavenly demon? Did he just say heavenly demon? There was a stir throughout the 10,000 great mountains. The name that had shaken the martial world most recently was precisely the heavenly demon. The domineering steps that collapsed the Shaolin Temple's 108 Arhat formation in his first appearance. The fortress that single-handedly brought down and sealed off the Sichuan Tang family, notorious for their poisons and assassination techniques throughout both the righteous and evil factions of the martial world. The submission of the spiritual sword sanctuary and its leader Ochionmu, one of the current pinnacles of the martial world, considered the best among neutral forces not belonging to either the righteous or evil factions. With these achievements alone, he had gained the title of Heaven, referring to the pinnacle of the martial world in the shortest time in martial arts history. This alone would be considered remarkable, but his groundbreaking actions didn't end there. Heaven and Earth Society. He had brought down the Heaven and Earth Society, one of the martial organizations called the 3 major powers that had maintained a delicate balance, and even made them his subordinates. This became the decisive turning point. Although there was justification that there had been friction with the 2 forces belonging to the Righteous Alliance from the beginning, His actions were relentless. Watching this progress, like an unstoppable charge, made them anxious that his blade might be at their throats at any moment. All of this became the real catalyst that moved them. What on earth is he made of? A monster? A real monster? Does his inner energy spring forth infinitely or something? Profound inner energy that could control thousands of weapons with energy while still communicating his will to them. It was truly beyond imagination. Because of their positions as righteous or evil, they wanted to deny it somehow, but inwardly they had to acknowledge it. That being was the true pinnacle of the current martial world. Having already seen the unruly evil Hegemon Hang Sim, one of the seven heavens, defeated before their eyes, this being's martial arts were on a completely different level. Whoosh. There's a saying that one rider is worth 1,000. It means one person can handle 1,000 cavalry, but this guy seemed poised to take on all these martial artists alone, surpassing even that. How on earth can we stop this? While the enemies were so fearful of his presence, the former Heaven and Earth Society warriors under Mok Jaeongun were different. Their morale had been falling as they fought against the overwhelming enemy forces, but the moment they saw the overwhelming majesty of their lord, their fighting spirit soared and cheers erupted. Wah! The thunderous cries of the warriors echoed throughout the 10,000 great mountains. This made the blood of all allies boil. Thud. Ho Taegang, the king of destruction, put down his axe on the ground, unable to contain his excitement. I've been waiting for this moment. The appearance of an absolute being in whom he could believe and follow completely. Until now, the Heaven and Earth Society had been one of the three major powers, but they had always had to suppress this boiling blood while maintaining that balance. Ah! It wasn't just him. Bright Blade King Sun Yun's complexion also gradually deepened as if responding to Mok Jaeongun's majesty and the rising morale of their allies. He was just a young boy we brought to continue the Moon Vein lineage. That boy had become an absolute being who made everyone fear him and feel awe. He was trembling with excitement. Whoosh! The Holy Fire Priestess, her granddaughter Yi Songa, and her lover Oh Yunwoo, who had climbed to a mountain peak at the rear of the battlefield leading the elderly, couldn't help but shudder. Thud. Grandmother. When the Holy Fire Priestess suddenly knelt down, Yi Songa, who was supporting her, was bewildered and tried to help her up again. No. But she refused, saying she was fine. Then with reddened eyes she looked at Mok Jaeongun in the sky, clasped her hands to her chest and opened her mouth. Ah! The brilliant flame that guides into darkness has descended upon the world. He is truly a god. Then she closed her eyes and recited reverently. This body burns in the sacred fire with no attachment to life or death. On the path I wish to go, I illuminate the light, leaving joy and sorrow as mere dust. How pitiful are the many troubled mortals. A scripture. It was a scripture of the Fire Faith Order. As she recited this, Yi Songa and Oh Yunwoo beside her also knelt down. And like the Holy Fire Priestess, they crossed their hands on their chests and reverently recited the scripture towards Mok Jaeongun, who was spreading thousands of weapons like wings. This body burns in the sacred fire with no attachment to life or death. On the path I wish to go, I illuminate the light, leaving joy and sorrow as mere dust. How pitiful are the many troubled mortals. It wasn't just the two of them reciting. As hundreds of cult members gathered in the Heaven and Earth Society recited the scripture, it spread reverently. Along with this, black flames began to flicker and burn from the numerous weapons around Mok Jaeongun. Whoosh! Thousands of weapons flickering with black flames. It was a sight incomparable to when the swords had merely floated. Shudder. How can this be? Like others, Saute of the Hengshan sect, who had been looking up with eyes full of fear, darkened her face and sat down in meditation. Then she put her palms together and chanted a sutra. Amitabha Buddha. As the black flames soared, the demonic energy spreading from the sky shook her righteous thoughts. She had no choice but to chant sutras to hold on to them. She wasn't the only one affected like this. The Taoist sects also chanted the primordial heavenly Lord, gathering their thoughts as they were pressed down by the demonic energy that was close to darkness itself. Damn it! What should we do? Why are you asking me that? Even the alliance leader ended up like that. How can we fight such a monster? Those black flames. They seem to be hard energy. And not just simple hard energy but containing demonic energy. That wasn't human. How could a human body imbue thousands of weapons with hard energy? It was so overwhelming that they couldn't help but be gripped by fear. Lim Mugun, the Red Evil Alliance leader of the Evil Alliance, clicked his tongue with a distorted expression. This is wrong. That's not a being that humans can handle. With just that one being, the concept of military strength had already become meaningless. Pressed down by this transcendent power, he no longer even wanted to continue the war. Just then Mok Jaeongun's voice echoed again. Those who have invaded my domain, swayed by foolish machinations. Kook. People here and there covered their ears at the voice that resonated like a lion's roar. Is it possible to have this much in one's inner energy after displaying such mastery of sword energy control and even raising heart energy? Lim Mugun was truly afraid of that being. This was the case not just for him but for most gathered here. As everyone was tense, Mok Jaeongun's voice continued to flow. The price for this should rightfully be death, but as it was done out of fear towards the absolute being leading all demons and out of ignorance due to petty machinations, I shall bestow a sliver of mercy. Mercy? Did he just say he would bestow mercy? At these words ringing in their ears, the faces of the Righteous Alliance executives and the Evil Alliance leaders and masters twisted with humiliation. They were not waging a defensive battle. They had gathered to annihilate these people under the pretext of upholding justice and eliminating a seed that would pose a danger to the martial world in the future. But now he's saying he'll bestow mercy on them who had invaded? It was utterly insulting. However, not a single person could refute these words. This was the same for the elders, senior members and top masters of each sect. Grip. How could this be? This is close to a great disaster. To submit to the momentum of just one person. This cannot be. We can't retreat. If we retreat here, future generations will laugh at us. We should fight even if it leads to the worst outcome. No one could carelessly open their lips. They couldn't irresponsibly bring about the terrible consequences they imagined in their minds. Grind. Though he tried not to show it, Mok Yucheon bit his lip hard at the sight of the Righteous Alliance warriors and pillars filled with terror and fear. The war he had tried so hard to prevent, even at the cost of sacrificing himself to persuade the higher-ups of the Righteous Alliance, was now being ended by that guy with power alone. You what on earth? Mok Yucheon slumped to the ground, dejected. Any competitive spirit or desire to surpass him had disappeared. Even during the internal conflict of the Heaven and Earth Society, he thought he had reached an unreachable realm, but now he had become like a star in the sky. He didn't know anymore. Perhaps now he should just be satisfied that the three major powers didn't clash. It was at that moment. Ha 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 ha. Suddenly, a burst of laughter erupted from somewhere. At this sudden laughter, the attention of those looking at Mok Jaeongun turned towards it. There they saw someone else floating in the sky. While those from the Evil Alliance couldn't recognize who he was, it was different for the Righteous Alliance side. Clan head Danmok? It was Danmok Inho, the head of the Danmok clan. The Righteous Alliance elders and executives couldn't hide their surprise at his appearance as he displayed the void walking technique. This was because, although he was the head of a clan, his martial arts weren't that high. Everyone was puzzled to see him displaying the void walking technique, considered the extreme of lightness skills, when they had known him to be just a mature supreme expert. But seemingly unconcerned with their gazes. Thud thud thud. Soon a third eye opened on Danmok Inho's forehead. What on earth is that on his forehead? An eye. There was a stir here and there at his appearance. Regardless, Danmok Inho snorted and then opened his mouth. I was going to enjoy watching foolish humans harm each other and approach destruction, but you just had to ruin that fun. What on earth is he saying? Why is the head of the Danmok clan saying such things? Rumble. As everyone was puzzled, those on the forward mountain peaks noticed something strange. The ground was shaking even though the war had temporarily stopped due to Mok Jaeongun's appearance. Why is the earth suddenly shaking? Among those wondering, someone's eyes widened to the point of tearing as they shouted. Look over there. What on earth is that? At someone's shout, all eyes in the vicinity turned in that direction. Black somethings marching forward, filling the horizon in front of the 10,000 great mountains. The eyes of those looking at them trembled. They weren't human. Those things too grotesque to be called beasts were undoubtedly monsters. How can there be so many? Rumble. The shaking of the earth intensified and the sound grew louder. Faced with the enormous number of monsters endlessly pouring in, filling the horizon, the warriors of the three major factions entangled at the front all took steps back with hardened expressions. How could so many monsters be surging to a place like this? Fear and terror are contagious. The overwhelmingly vast number of evil spirits and monsters soon became visible even from most of the peaks in the 10,000 Great Mountains. The resulting confusion and commotion was no less than that caused by Mok Jaeongun's appearance. This can't be. What kind of strange phenomenon is this? How could these strange beings, or rather evil spirits and monsters, that one might see once in a lifetime if at all, be surging forward in such a large group? Everyone was dumbfounded, overwhelmed by their enormous numbers. Seeing their expressions, Danmok In-ho raised the corner of his mouth with a face full of madness. Yes. That's the face you insignificant beings should make. He had wanted to see them fight each other more and self-destruct, but it didn't matter now. Given this situation, he could first erase the martial world with a calamity incomparable to the previous one, then wipe out the human seed. This is what despair looks like. Swish. Danmok In-ho turned his head to glare at Mok Jaeongun. Although the guy's power far exceeded his expectations, those thousands of sword energy blades were just for show, mere bluster. No matter how much mastery over space, resonance with swords, and matchless capability one had, it was virtually impossible to handle so many swords simultaneously. Swish, 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 swish. It was at that moment. The thousands of swords filling the sky, aimed at the base of the 10,000 Great Mountains, changed their formation and then turned towards the evil spirits and monsters surging towards the front of the 10,000 Great Mountains. Seeing this, Danmok In-ho furrowed his brow and shouted at Mok Jaeongun. What on earth are you trying to do? Even for you this is reckless. It's absolutely nothing I can't do. What? Heavenly Void Bright Light, 8 Immortals Sword Competition. No sooner had those words ended. From the tips of the thousands of weapons burning with demonic energy, sword energy bursts became black light streams and exploded forth. But that wasn't the end. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The light streams that burst forth split into 8 branches again in midair, and in an instant the sky was covered with black light streams, a black meteor shower. The eyes of the evil spirits and monsters, marching forward filled with some unknown will, shook madly at the numerous black lights flying towards them, filling their front view.